Oh, oh, yeah. Oh, oh, yeah.
Hey guys, it's Emily. Thanks for joining me again this week for another controversial conversation. I want to talk about something today that really and truly should not be controversial, yet somehow I manage to make everything in my life controversial. And today I want to talk about civic engagement. So I know that should not be controversial to be engaged in your local communities, but somehow I seem to find a way to always make this a controversial thing. So I'm engaged with a lot of civic things throughout Madison Limestone County. I've mentioned that I'm with Moms for Liberty. I'm also in our executive committee. I'm with several other organizations. I'm with the women's groups. I do all sorts of things. And I do the same thing in every single one of those organizations that I've always done since I was, in elementary school. I do it in work. I do it everywhere. I ask questions. Questions should not be controversial, but I have found that when I ask questions, it really disrupts the status quo. And that in and of itself makes it very controversial. So I have always asked questions. It's just what I do. I get on my own nerves with all the questions that I ask, but it's just how my brain functions. I don't understand something and I ask a question and then I go down a rabbit hole and I ask a whole bunch of other questions. And I have learned the very hard way that asking questions really causes controversy because it makes people very uncomfortable. And that's just unfortunate because it is who I am and I will always ask questions. So I want to focus on civic engagement. So if you're not aware of it and you live in the state of Alabama, the next 3 years, well, this year plus the next 2 years, there's a lot of elections going on. So we all know this is a presidential year. We've gone through the cycle of electing our president, and we've got a Republican slated to come into office next year. So that's great and wonderful. We're really excited about that. A lot of people want to say, okay, Trump's in office, the battle's been won, we don't have to be super engaged anymore. But you are very, very, very wrong on that front. So that's what I want to focus on is 25 and 26 in the state of Alabama and what that means for us. So in 2025, we have almost all of our local and municipal races coming up for reelection. So I don't think it's always been that way that they've been in a year off by themselves, but and I don't understand all the details behind this, but Governor Ivey, I guess, signed an executive order or something that moved almost all of our municipal races outside of a presidential or governor year or race, and they're kind of a standalone. And that's what's happening next year in 2025. Now, not all of them are next year. I know here in Madison, some of those positions for like Huntsville City Council were in this year in 24, but most of them are next year. I know for Madison City Council, all of those are next year. Athens City Council, all those are next year. And there's a bunch of other ones that I can't even remember at the moment. So 25 is a huge year for local races. And that's really what I want to focus on. I have not always been involved in politics. Really, up until COVID, I didn't pay attention to a whole lot of it. But that, COVID changed a lot of my perspective as it did with most people. And from that, I started getting more civically engaged and I really focus more at a higher level, more federal level, maybe state, but never local. But I remember I was sitting down with a friend who had been involved in politics for years, and we were just talking about, the change of everything that was going on. And I just mentioned that I, at that point, didn't even know who my state representative was. And we chatted on that, and I will never forget him talking about local matters. And like it sunk in, I knew what he meant, but I didn't understand the gravity of what he was saying until really COVID and then the following years. So, as I've gotten more engaged politically and civically, I've started understanding that concept of local matters. And I can give some really quick examples of why local matters so much. So, as I have gotten more engaged, whether it was through COVID, the library wars, or Title IX, it doesn't matter what it is. It's always come back to a local situation. So let's talk about COVID. So my son was in public school during COVID and they were doing forced masking. I remember contacting my local school board and superintendent during all of that to question why we were masking our kids. Now, for me, I'm very detail oriented, I'm very thorough. I spent hours, if not days, researching forced masking. I wanted to make sure that what I put in the email to them was not only well written, but it was almost like sources cited. I wanted to link back to the material that I had read. I wanted to prove to the board and the superintendent that I had researched the topic at hand. So I spent a lot of time in that email. I spelled everything out, I referenced everything, and I just talked about how detrimental it was for our children to be masked 8 hours a day. And I will never forget the response that I got back from the superintendent was basically, "Thank you, but we followed the guidance of our local health board." And I understood why they would do that, but also it was not an appropriate answer. I wanted more. I wanted to understand why, as a school board, why, as a superintendent, you were not standing up and fighting and asking questions of those that were handing down guidance. I could point to why that was a bad thing. So, why were you, as our leadership, not doing the same thing and questioning this guidance? So, it's very disheartening to have gotten that, but it helped to open my eyes that most people will not ask questions. They will just do as they're told. So then, of course, that rolled into forced vaccines that people dealt with. And the more those things happened and the less I saw people asking questions, the more I realized that people really do just follow the status quo because they do not want to be the disruptor. Unfortunately, for those that I deal with, I'm very comfortable being the disruptor. I actually kind of enjoy it. I'm the youngest in my family, so I've been a disruptor from day one. It's just naturally who I am. So, bringing that mindset into the civic world is very uncomfortable for the people around me, but it's just who I am at this point. So that's really how I got involved with the civics piece of it is through COVID. And then I started Moms for Liberty as kind of the next step in that progression because I wanted more answers. I wanted better for me and my child and my community. So I started Moms for Liberty. And through that, really kind of amped up my civic engagement. Then we started dealing with the libraries and the craziness that was going on there with these filthy books being placed on the shelf for young kids. And then we started dealing with more educational problems, really specific to my son. But it all came back to one thing: city council. Our library board is appointed by city council. In Madison City, our board of education is appointed by city council. All of our economic development, local taxes, all of those things come back to city council. Now, not every local municipality is structured that way. A lot of them are appointing their boards of education, but not all of them. Still, in some areas, the board of education is still elected. In a couple of areas, they actually still elect their superintendent. We're moving further away from that, which I personally disagree with. I think all these positions should be elected. These people should be held accountable to the people in the community, not an elected board. But that's a whole nother conversation for another day. So, in all of the things that we deal with on a day to day basis, whether it's taking kids to school, whether it's grocery shopping and paying taxes, whether it's road construction and maintenance, or if it's issues at the library, it all goes back to some form of your local government, your local city council. So, local matters. Local matters a lot in your day to day life, a whole lot more than I ever truly appreciated or understood until the recent years. Local matters. So let's think about the things we're seeing out at Prattville right now. For anyone that's not following Prattville, like you need to search Prattville every single day. There is craziness coming out of that area. I do not understand. I have wonderful friends down there that are hardcore conservatives. So I do not understand the liberal chaos that comes out of Prattville, but they are like the epicenter for all of this madness. They were on the front lines when it came to the library stuff, and lo and behold, if it didn't spill out into every other area of the state. So the current thing going on in Prattville that everyone should be aware of and tracking very closely is this craziness with their Christmas parade. So Prattville has an annual Christmas parade. It's a Christmas parade, so you can just naturally assume what's typically in the Christmas parade. Santa, elves, probably some very Christ centered floats, whatever. But this year, there was a new twist to that. There was a group that wanted to have a drag performance in the middle of the Christmas parade. As you can imagine, there were lots of people in the community that just had a huge uproar over this because it's a kid friendly Christmas parade, because parades are for children. And then you've got these drag performers in the middle of all of it. So parents were in an uproar. They did not want this. They obviously started speaking out and went to city council to ask that the drag queen, not or drag queens, I should say, not be allowed in the Christmas parade. Now, there is currently no law in the state of Alabama that prevents this. There is a law or a bill filed for next session that will start to address these issues, but at this moment in time, there's nothing legally that prevents them. So the citizens did what naturally you should do. They called on city council to pass a city ordinance. If there's not a law, we can pass a city ordinance that prevents this from happening. Now, for whatever reason, and I don't know the details behind it, so I'm not going to allude to anything, but city council refused to pass a city ordinance to prevent this from happening. So, as all of that was going on, I'm talking to my girlfriends up here in the Madison Limestone area and saying, this is coming here next. Like, we need to be prepared for that. We need to get ahead of it. We need to stop the train from wrecking and not clean up the carnage later. Let's get ahead of it. So again, I had suggested to my girlfriends, we need to start going to city council, start talking about this, and start pushing for a city ordinance. And of course, our group naturally, because we've been involved in this a lot, we know these are not easy things. So there was the immediate, well, city council is not going to want to do it. This is going to be hard. And I just reminded everybody, in 2025, almost every single one of these positions come up for reelection. So we need to make this a ballot initiative. Either city council passes a city ordinance that prevents this craziness from happening, or we vote them out of office next year. That's the importance of grassroots activism in the civic arena. So that's kind of where our head is right now, is how do we start getting city council aware of this and empower them to do what's right, to pass city ordinances that actually represent and reflect the values of our community. So we will be moving out on that very soon in hopes to prevent those issues from moving here or coming here to Madison and Limestone. So that's the importance of civic engagement, is you see the things happening around you and you know how to activate a group to start fighting the battle before it's even here, to prevent things from happening. You know what's coming down the pike in terms of elections and who's up for which seat when, and you start rallying behind the right person for each of those seats. So civic engagement is huge. 2025 is going to be huge for local elections. And we need to make sure that we've got our eye on that and we've got the right people running. And then once we get through 2025 and 2026, you have your state level elections. So your governor, lieutenant governor, AG, state rep, state senator, state school board, state auditor, all the things at the state level come up in 26. So then we've got to make sure we get really strong grassroots conservatives in the legislature. We have a Republican supermajority right now. If you don't follow that very closely, I will point out that it's a Republican supermajority, but there's a whole lot of rhinos in there that really and truly don't align with grassroots conservatism. So we've got some work to do in 2026 as well, but we got to get through 2025 first because local matters most. So we've got to do that. So there's a lot of things going on in the next 2 years. Please do not think because Trump won the presidency that our job is done and we can just take a step back and let him handle it. He can only do so much, and he's going to have to handle things obviously at a federal level. But when it comes down to who's in your local parades, what books are on the bookshelf, what policies are being implemented in your local school, those are local decisions that presidential elections never going to impact. So I implore you, see what's going on in your community. Find the topics that matter most to you. What is your passion? And dig into that. Ask questions. Know who's on your city council. Know who your county commissioners are. Know your mayors. Know all these people and know what they truly stand for. It's one thing to say, oh, he's a good guy. My mom goes to church with him or whatever. The question, the thing you must judge them by is, will they stand up and fight? During COVID, when the health department was saying you need to mask kids, is the person you're voting for one of the people that would have said, oh, well, that's what we were told to do, so we did it? Or is the person you're voting for going to say, no, I'm going to be disruptive and I'm going to push back? I'm going to ask why that's the policy that we're pushing. I'm going to fight for what's right, even when it's not convenient. And if that's the person you're voting for, then that is perfect. That's exactly what we need. That is how we drive change in our local communities. And that's what we need from a grassroots perspective. So, know what seats are coming up in your area for election next year in 25, and go ahead and look at 26 and then find a way to get engaged. If you know the seats that are coming up and there's not a good person running, consider running. It's really not that big a deal. I have always been intimidated by running for office because I've always thought, well, I just don't know enough to be able to do that. I have spent the past 2 years talking to people from mayors to city councils to state reps to AGs. I mean, you name it. I've talked to them. And I can promise you, these people are not that smart. Some of them are really good. Some of them are great. Don't get me wrong, but they're really not that smart. When I have to sit down with a legislator and explain, well, this is the current law, then we got some problems. So don't be intimidated by that. I promise you, these people are average. They are not super smart. They're not Elon Musk or anything like that. So don't be afraid to run for office. It's actually a whole lot easier than you realize. And if you don't believe me, go sit down with a couple of elected officials in your area and ask them some hard questions, and you'll be amazed at how little they know. Truly, and I don't mean that to be mean, they just don't know as much as you think they do. So consider running for office. If you're not in a position where you can run for office, because it is a commitment, I'm not going to say that it's not. If you're not in a position where you can run for office, then find somebody that is running for office that is truly conservative and willing to stand up and fight, and then help with their campaign. You can donate money to them, that's always helpful. You can host fundraising events for them. If you're really well connected in the community, host an event, invite a bunch of friends, invite the candidate, and raise money for them. That would be huge. If you're still not in a position to help with any of that, you can door knock, you can make phone calls, you can send text messages. There's so much that you can do. And the level of involvement really just depends on what you can do. It takes time, it takes effort. I'm not going to say that it doesn't, but I'm a single mom. I work full time. I lead Moms for Liberty here in Madison. I lead our legislative committee. I meet with legislators all throughout the year, and I still find time to help with local civic efforts, whether it's speaking at library board meetings, whether it's going to Georgia and door knocking for Trump, whatever it is. Every little bit helps, and we can all do something. So find a way to get engaged, help with the elections, run for a seat. We need more conservatives out there. There's so much that can be done in 25 and 26, and we need everybody out there helping with that as much as we can. So I encourage you to go look up these elections, see what's going on in your area. If you have questions about it, let me know. I'm trying to check comments on these videos as they post. So if you can't figure something out, or you've just got a question in general, leave a comment and I will do everything I can to help you figure that out. But there's a lot going on. Get engaged civically. Local matters most, and we need more people like you on board helping to really and truly retake our community so that it better reflects the values of our community and what we stand for, and not what the status quo politicians have really made it into be the past couple of years. So get engaged. It's really fun. You can do the most controversial thing imaginable, and that is sit down, have a conversation, and dear God, ask a question. It's amazing what you will learn, I promise. So, thanks, guys, for joining me again this week. I have enjoyed talking with all of you, and I appreciate all the feedback that we've been getting on the podcast, whether it's on YouTube or Twitter or wherever it may be. It's been really fun just getting to talk to people and really just engaging that way. So, thanks for coming by, and I look forward to the next controversial conversation.